Do we have the potential to be morally perfect? Today we're going to look at some of the teachings in the Gospel of John that address this question.
So today we're going to start in the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verse 12. This is Jesus' words. Most certainly I tell you, he who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do also. And he will do greater works than these because I'm going to my Father.
So what Jesus is saying here is that if one of his followers believes in him, he has the potential to do the works that Jesus did.
Right. So Jesus is showing us that his followers have the potential to be morally perfect just like he was.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a number of verses in the Gospel of John where Jesus is speaking about himself. And what we're going to see is that in the context of those very verses, he's going to tell us that we have the potential to do the same thing that he did. So the first one we're going to read is John 14:30. Jesus said, "The prince of the world comes and he has nothing in me."
Obviously, Satan came trying to convict Jesus of something, and Jesus had the moral perfection to actually make the right decision and never follow darkness that Satan was presenting for him to follow.
Right. So there was nothing to convict him of. In John 14:31, this is the very next verse, Jesus said, "As the Father commanded me, even so I do."
Jesus was obedient to his Father. As his Father taught him, those were the actions that he always took.
Yes. Now we're going to go to John 15, verse 10. Jesus said, this is very similar, "I have kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love."
So obviously, Jesus again is following the commandments, the teachings. He's obedient to those teachings, and he remains in his Father's love.
Yes. Then John 8:46, Jesus says, "Which of you convicts me of sin?"
So here Jesus is asking this question amongst a group of people around him, and obviously nobody has anything that they can convict him of.
Yes. So basically, the moral character Jesus had, as expressed in these statements, is something he also taught could be had by his followers. So, the first ones we're going to read again. Jesus said, "The prince of the world comes, and he has nothing in me." That was John 14:30. Then the very next verse, Jesus said, "As the Father commanded me, even so I do."
So earlier in John chapter 14, Jesus said in verse 12, "He who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do also." So Jesus did the works of his Father. Those works were obedience to the teachings of his Father. In Jesus' own words, he's telling us that we have the moral potential to be obedient to his works.
Right, we have the potential to follow the commands of the Father, just like Jesus followed the commands of the Father. Okay, and then similarly, we have in John 15:10, remember Jesus said, "I have kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love." Well, if we broaden that context a little bit, we're going to see the very first part of that exact same verse. Jesus said, "If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love." So again, we see this same kind of thing where Jesus is saying, hey, I've kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love, and you have the potential to keep his Father's commandments and remain in the Father's love too. It's that same kind of thing. What Jesus did, we have the potential to do as well. And then the last of these verses that we read earlier, John 8:46, Jesus said, remember, "Which of you convicts me of sin?" So when Jesus said, "Which of you convicts me of sin?" this is part of a dialogue in which he's talking about sin and people being freed from sin. And so earlier in the same conversation, Jesus said, "Most certainly I tell you, everyone who commits sin is the bondservant of sin." And that's John 8:34.
So being a bondservant of sin means you're not following Jesus' teachings. But if you're no longer a bondservant of sin, well, then you would not continue to commit sin.
Is that really possible?
Well, just a couple verses later, Jesus says, "If therefore the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed." That's free in fact. So yes. So that was John 8:36, and Jesus is saying that you will be free indeed if you follow him. Free in fact, that you individually will have the actual experience, not in name only, not in some kind of legal status. It's not some kind of an illusion. It's an actual fact that you have the potential for moral perfection. It's an actual reality.
Right. Jesus is making a claim here that he has the ability to set us free from sin indeed, that is something that is a possibility for us.
if we are completely obedient to his teaching.
Right.
We do our part, he does his part.
So it can be the case, because we have the potential to be morally perfect, it's possible that we will no longer be a bondservant of sin and that no one would be able to convict us of any sin at that point. We know that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We know that Jesus never ever committed a sin. But what Jesus is saying here is that he can set us free indeed from sin. So then no one would be able to convict us of sin at that point. So we're going to give a couple more examples of this same sort of thing in addition to the things we've already mentioned, where Jesus is going to say something concerning himself, and then he's going to use the same sort of language describing what his followers potentially can do as well. And Jesus said in John 8:28, I do nothing of myself, but as my Father taught me. And similarly in John 5:19, Jesus said, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he sees his Father doing.
That's really interesting. Jesus actually is talking about what his Father taught him. So he was taught by the Father to be obedient. He was taught by the Father how to do the right thing.
Right.
And he did it.
Right. And in John 5:19, by doing nothing of himself, he's giving more explanation of what that means. It means he does what he sees the Father doing. So he's not doing anything independent of God. He's depending on God. He's doing what he sees his Father doing. He's doing what his Father taught him to do. So these are words indicating that
full obedience.
Obedience, yeah. Now, Jesus said this about his followers. Okay, notice the similar language here. In John 15:4-5, Jesus said, remain in me and I in you. As the branch can't bear fruit by itself unless it remains in the vine, so neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who remains in me and I in him bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing.
Just as Jesus relied on his Father's teachings, the followers of Jesus need to rely on Jesus' teachings. And if they do that, they are just like a branch attached to the vine. And the fruit that they bear is going to be the result of obedience to Christ.
Right. When Jesus says, apart from me, you can do nothing, is very similar to Jesus saying about himself, I do nothing of myself. The Son can do nothing of himself. Basically, what Jesus is saying about himself, he's telling us that we need to do the same thing and live the same way that he did. So finally, we're going to read some straightforward statements from Jesus about what can be true about his followers, in addition to these parallels we've already mentioned. For example, Jesus said in John 8:12, he who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life.
So those who follow Jesus, follow the teachings of Jesus, are obviously not going to walk in darkness or falsehood. They're going to have the truth. They're going to be walking in the light of life.
Well, and walking in darkness really is acting according to darkness. So it's doing things that are disobedient. That's what walking in darkness is. These are acts. Obviously, darkness is akin to falsehoods and light is akin to truth. So we can see here that beliefs and actions are very closely related here. But Jesus is speaking beyond belief. Walking in the darkness is acting according to falsehood. And those who follow Jesus have the potential not to follow falsehood. And then in John 3:19-21, Jesus says, this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men loved the darkness rather than the light, for their works were evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light and doesn't come to the light, lest his works would be exposed. But he who does the truth comes to the light, that his works may be revealed, that they have been done in God. So again, Jesus is focusing on his followers' works, right? If they're loving darkness rather than light, their works were evil. Their actions are evil. And if they're loving the light, then they're doing the truth. Whoever does the truth, their works reveal that they're done in God. So these are action words. These are words indicating that someone is choosing to do the right thing or someone is choosing to do the wrong thing.
So Jesus is telling us here that it's possible for his followers to be morally perfect, just like Jesus was, to live in perfect obedience to God, to walk in the light, to do the truth, which is to say, ultimately, to not sin.
Right, and it's more than just believing in Jesus, more than just believing true things. It's actually acting according to righteousness, according to the truth, according to the light. So what would be the main takeaway for today?
Jesus taught that it is possible for his followers to actually live a life of moral perfection, just like Jesus did. Thank you for staying with us till the end. We invite you to visit our website, www.bdsda.com, to learn more about who we are and, just as important, who we are not. Please join us as we will continue to offer new and interesting insights for your Sabbath School studies.
And if you want to keep up with our new studies as they're published, we recommend subscribing. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on plenty of other podcast apps. Links for subscribing are in the description.
God bless.
Many blessings.